Hey guys, welcome back to API testing. In this lecture we're going to learn some API terminology as well as some technology that helps to build the API. It's like architectural, the technology that is used to build an API. So when you talk about an API nowadays, mostly we're talking about the web API. If you have gone through my last lecture, you know that's like we discuss more details about the API testing. So before we jump on the API testing, let's have some terminology that use on API and also that is used to build on API specifically for web API. So this over here, we know this for web API they use a JSON and XML format, right, to receive the request and also return the response. So how those things work, so let's go back to our document. So there are two types of, as you notice, there are two types of web service or API. Nowadays it's available in the market. So the two types of, when you say, those are the like two technology they use to build an API, which is the architectural point of view. So one is called SOAP API. So SOAP is defined as Simple Object Access Protocol. This web service protocol exchanges structured data using XML and generally HTTP or SMTP for transmission. Simply, the SOAP technology or SOAP API, they use XML format to receive and respond the data through the HTTP and SMTP protocol. SOAP is also used WSDL. It's called WSDL. It's a web services description language. It's a document to describe a web service description model. What would be the old description for the the SOAP API? It have to be described on a document, and the document type is called WSDL or WSDL. It needs some more discussion about that, but this is very high level just idea, because we're not over here to create an API. So this is just the overall idea we need to understand. So when you're going to use the going to do the API testing, it will help us to realize, to understand all the details and the breakdown part of the API. Anyways, so this is the overall SOAP API, and the SOAP API, it has some, the problem is like it is difficult to set up. It is more involved with more coding and harder to develop. That's the SOAP API. So SOAP API is kind of like legacy, the API technology. A lot of old companies still they are using SOAP API, but it's most of the new company, or new, whoever they're building an API, they're all moving to another technology, using that for the different another API, which is called the RESTful API. So most of the modern company, or even also some legacy company, they are moving towards to the using the new technology, which is the based on RESTful or RESTful technology for the REST API. So what does it mean? It means the representational state transfer. So that's the stand for the RESTful API. So RESTful API or web services are basically REST architecture based web services. In REST architecture, everything is a resource. So this is very important. Everything is a resource. So REST web services are lightweighted compared to SOAP API, highly scalable and maintainable, and are very commonly used to create APIs for web-based application. So these are the main advantages, why most of the company they are using RESTful API, or they choose the RESTful API compared to SOAP API, because RESTful API is very lightweighted. They use a JSON format instead of XML, and they are very highly scalable and easy to maintain, and very commonly used for the web-based application. That's why. So Here's the API developers can implement REST in varieties of ways. When a client request is made by a RESTful API, it transfers a representation of the state of the resource to the requester or endpoint. We'll come to an endpoint soon. What is endpoint? Just bear with me. I will explain. Right after that, there will be endpoint. So endpoint, nothing. Just you can say like the API URI or API URL. So that's the endpoint, right? So this information or representation is delivered in one of several formats via HTTP. So when there is a request goes to hit to the endpoint or hit to the RESTful API, that goes through the HTTP protocol. So over here we know this. This is like your client, and this client send a request. And the request first is hit to the API. So before this request goes to the API, it goes through the HTTP protocol or internet. This is the same protocol it's happened they use for the SOAP API too. So there is a this REST HTTP protocol. It's help you to transfer your REST request to the RESTful API. And JSON is a JavaScript object notation. HTML, those are the HTML or XML or Python, PHP or plain text. So the information goes through to the REST API as a JSON format or HTML format or plain the Python or PHP or plain text. Even the information can pass through as in different format. So JSON is the most generally popular file format to use because despite its name, it is a language agnostic. It means it works with all different languages, so it accepts all different languages. So as well as it's readable by the both human and machine. So it's easy to read by the human and machine, as well as it can work with all different languages. That's why the RESTful API is very popular nowadays. It's easy to manage, maintain, write the code, as well as it's very lightweighted compared to RESTful SOAP API. SOAP API, you can see over here, it also uses the HTTP protocol, but however the description or information is or data use XML format. So XML is kind of more heavy weighted compared to JSON format. Okay, that's why. So it's you can see that's why XML and JSON, this is the two format the API they use. So now it's clear to you. JSON is used for the REST API and XML used by the SOAP API. So now it's very clear to us, right? RESTful API, it has much more advantages compared to SOAP API. Let's see some key elements now about the RESTful API implementation. Since most of the company they prefer RESTful API, so our testing would be based on all RESTful API. Some of the legacy companies still they are using SOAP API, but they are moving to now RESTful, and all the new company there's whoever using the API, they're all using the RESTful API. So here is our all example will be based on RESTful API. So some terminology that I use in to build a RESTful architectural based API. One is the first things, it's endpoint or based URI. So what is endpoint? It's endpoint is nothing is just address where API is hosted on the server, because API is nothing, just a URL. There will be some URL, and that URL will be hosted to a server where that URL will hold some coding up there and some business logic up there. It will be the information will be happen over there. So this REST API, when you say this, we're sending some requests. Example, front end is by using the Radisson hotel. They're So when this request goes through the HTTP protocol and it's hit first, it will hit the Redstone API or whatever their API. If it's a RESTful, it will be based on the JSON format. So this API is nothing. It will be there will be URL. So how this front end will talk to the API through a URL, okay, or it's called endpoint. API endpoint. What is the API endpoint? Okay, so to test your API, we must need the API endpoint. Okay, so that's the terminology comes from over here. So the endpoint, or it's called base URI. So base URI is nothing, just uniform resource identifier. Okay, so just overall it's endpoint, it's just a URL, but it's more appropriate to say it is a base URI, and URI means uniform resource identifier. Now what is resource? Let's talk about over here. So resource or resource are the first key element in the resource itself. Let's assume there is a web application on a server has record several employees. So there is an application that is store employees record, and the application's URL, this is the URL, the demo.codeinbox.com. Okay, now in order to access an employee record resource by a REST API or REST service, one can issue the command. The command or URL would be demo.codeinbox.com/employee. So this is the base URL that hold some employees information. Now if you want to get more specific, that you want to get the information about the employee using the REST API, that time the URL would be the demo.codeinbox.com/employee, and this command tells the web server to please provide the list of details of the employees. Okay, so here resource employee is the employee part is the resource. Okay, you can see employee part is where it has all the record about the resource, about the query. Okay, that's why the resource is the first element that have to be part in our endpoint. So endpoint, again, endpoint is nothing, just a URL or that for the API that going to be hit to send the request or to receive the request. Okay, and the endpoint, and in this endpoint, resource is the first element. What is the resource part over here? Example, after this is your domain name, right? The codeinbox.com, this is the actual domain, application domain, and after from this domain you want to get some query, you want to get some response, you want to get some data about the employee. Then this is the when is URL, you use /employee. So this employee is the resource. Okay, and this resource part is the the key element that have to be mentioned in your endpoint. So in your API endpoint, it have to be part of the resource. That's why we said endpoint or base URI, and where resource have to be include to your endpoint. So that's we understood very clear. The on endpoint, API endpoint, a resource have to be there. Okay, so the resource, clearly we can say, other hand, the resource represent API or collection which can be accessed over server. Okay, so API is nothing. Altogether we can say API is the collection of information. It's represent collection of information that comes through a server, or API is the resources. API, other hand, we can say API, it's all about resources. Example over here more. If you say google.com/map, over here google.com is the base URL. This is the actual domain. of the application, and here is specifically maps is the resource, or you can say maps is the actual API that will deliver all the data related maps. Okay, specifically here again google.com/search, here is the search is the resource, and the google.com is the your base URL, and again images is the resource, and the google.com is the base URL. So you see this resource is the one of the first element on your API endpoint have to be there. Okay, so I hope that it's very clear. And so API is nothing, is the resource, is carry the resource. So along with resource, API can pass path or query element. This is very important too. So beside resource, API also can pass path or query element. So what is path or query element now? So let's see the path. So path parameter are available parts of a URL path. They are typically used to point to a specific resource or sub resource within a collection of such an employee ID identified by ID. So path is nothing, you can say path parameter is nothing, is a subset of resource. So all together over here we can say maps is the resource, right, or employee is the resource. But if you want to make it more specific resource, like subset of the resource, we can say that's called the path parameter. Example over here we say demo.codeinbox.com/employee. So employee is the resource, and /1, this is the ID of a specific one employee. So this command tells the web server to please provide the details of the employee whose ID number or employee number is 1. So here is 1 is the path parameter. Okay, so 1 is the here path parameter. So other hand we can say path parameter is nothing, is the subset of your resource. Okay, so everything is all together is called resource. But when you have a out of resource, there is a more specific data, more specific, you want to more narrow down. So out of all the employee, you want to get the data about the employee who's number 1 or employee ID 1. That time this one will consider as a path parameter. So that's why path parameter is the subset, or you can sub of the resource. Okay, so here more example over here you can say google.com images. So images over here is a resource, and here is the 1 2 3. So you want to retrieve a specific image, number is 111,244. So this 111,244 is the path parameter of the image resource. Okay, over here order /123. So order is your resource or API, and out of this resource you want to retrieve order number 1 to 3. Here 1 to 3 is a path parameter or sub resource of order resource. Hopefully that's very clear. Okay, there is another part that could become with your resource is called query parameter. So what is query parameter? Is used to sort or filter the resource. It is used to sort or filter the resource. So resource now we know it's very clear. It will have a the big number of data, right? It's overall the it will provide the data, and if from out of that data if you want to make it some specific query, like over here you make it mention by the ID number or by the order number, by the image number, specifically you said to retrieve that for that data, for that specific order or this specific image, which is the path query. Similar to if we want to filter, if we want to sort, like it's like kind of like searching, filter the resource. That time we use a question mark. We use a question mark with the resource. After the resource, here is the your base URL, this amazon.com, orders is the your resource, and after the resource if you use question mark, this question mark will help to filter your resource following the rest of the part after the question mark. So this, so when you use question mark, this question mark is used to sort or filter the resource, and after this question mark, rest of the part is all together is called query parameter. This is also subset of your resource. Okay, so after the resource you could have two different sub of resource. One could be path parameter, like specific you want to get the data. Another one, it could be query parameter, that you are searching. The query parameter help you to search or filter the resource. Okay, that's the two different sub parameter can comes along with your resource. Okay, and all together, it's called the API, okay, or resources, because the first part is nothing, it's just your domain. It's just your domain or your base URL, and after that the rest of the part is your API, and all together is called API endpoint. Okay, so API endpoint, now if you come to our over here, API endpoint is nothing, it's all together, it's your domain name, right? So you can see over here, so endpoint, it's endpoint request is nothing, it's like your base URI, your domain name, and your resources. And your resources could have two paths. It could be you have one, or it could be you have another one. It could be you could have a query parameter, or it could have a path parameter. Okay, or could be just only the resources. Okay, so that's the, you can say, the high level architectural, the view, the look, how would be the endpoint. Okay, now when you send a request, if you come back to our diagram, when you front end send a request through HTTP protocol to the REST API, right? REST API. So to sending the request or receiving the response through the REST API, the HTTP protocol, they use number of method, okay, to send, because there is a different type of request we use to talk between the front end and your REST API. So sometimes you can send data to get some response, right? Sometimes you can create some data to the database. So it's a request type is the difference. So based on what type of request you are sending, there is a different type of HTTP protocol is being used in REST API. So we're going to see now RESTful API HTTP method. So what type of different HTTP method that we use to send any request based on type of the request we're doing. So this HTTP method is describe what you want to do with the resource. It means with the endpoint, with the API. There is a there's a diagram. It shows, I will show you over here, when you have a resource example over here. So we said our employee is the resource, or employee /1, which is the specific number, the employee number 1. This is our resource altogether, we can say. So in this resource or endpoint, we can send different number of requests. So what would be the different number of requests? It depends on what type of request you want to send, what type of job you want to do through this API. And here is a number of HTTP method that can use to send different type of requests through the front end to these resources. So one method is called post, another one is called get, another one is called put, another one is called delete. So let's see that what the post method does. So post, it's help you to create a post request is used to send data to the server. I mean, all the methods help you to send data. So what type of data? The post means this would be used to create a new employee. If we talk about specifically this request, this resource, like employee resource, just think about, we're talking about the employee request. So that time, when you want to create a new employee, that time you have to use a post method. So post HTTP method, it's help you to create a new data to the server, to the database. So if you want to create new data, that time you can use post method will help you to create new data to the database. Okay, and next is get method or get HTTP method is help you to read or select. It means retrieve or extract the data. This method is used to extract information from the giver from the server using a given URI. So when you use a get method that hit to a endpoint or server to a RESTful API, it will help you. So example for over here for the resources, if you consider the employee/employee1, this is our endpoint. When you use the get when you use the get method, that will hit to this URI or this endpoint, it means it will retrieve the data specifically for employee number 1. So get, it's only used to read the data or retrieve the data from the database. It is just the only to retrieve the data. You can read it, like you can retrieve all the employees. If you just use the resources /employee, it will retrieve all the data for all the employees details. If you use employee/1, it will retrieve the data only for the employee number 1. So overall, get method is used to retrieve the data, okay, or select the data. Next is put method. So put method, or you can say put, is update, is used to update the data. So if you need to replace some of your employees, some of the employees data, that time you can use the put method. Put can help you to replace your current representation of the targeted resource with the uploaded content. Means this would be used to update all employees using the RESTful web services, RESTful API. So in easy way to understand, that put method will help you to to update some data to the existing data you have on your server. So on your database server, say you have a employee 1 and it has employee's name like first name, last name, and then employee ID. Example, you want to change the employee ID from 1 to 5. So that time you can use put HTTP. So your request type would be the put. So your request method would be the put method that will update your existing data. Okay, and lastly we use the delete also. So delete method is very clear. It means we know it's help you to delete. It means it deletes some data. So this would be used to delete. If you want to delete any specific employee, or you want to delete some all employee, it's totally up to you. You can use the delete method to delete any data from your RESTful server, okay, from your server using the REST API. Okay, so that's the main, this is the 4 method that we use: post, get, put, and delete method. Here is an example. Okay, this is the Postman look. Okay, you will not understand now, but we'll cover that, how to install the Postman, how to set up the project, everything, just for your understanding for now. Whatever we have covered, you can see there is a request that I create, get request. It's to get all the employees. So if you hit, and this is over here, you can see this is the endpoint. Okay, this is the method, this is the endpoint. If you click on send, it will show this is the response, and this response, you will see this response will show you all the the employee name it's supposed to show you all the employee name. You can see all the, or let me, okay, you can see over here, here is a, like, a status. So you'll not understand now, but you can see there is a, this is the response, like, there's the data, the employee ID 1, and this like employee name, salary, age, and those are the different parameter. That's the response it shows. So here is the employee ID 2 and employee ID 3 and so on. So this is like the response. Okay, so and we want to retrieve all the employees record. So this is like a response, and that's why we use a get. And like over here, example, if we want to, here you can see there's a post method we use. This is the endpoint for the post. So it means post will, it will update. So here is the data that we're passing over here, like name, salary, age, so this will be update the data for a specific employee. Okay, so if you click on send, you will see it will show you over here. So it's the status is success. It means this data has been updated to its corresponding employee. Okay, so that's the, and so it depends on what type of job or request you want to do. Based on that your request, you have to choose the different type of HTTP method. Okay, now let's get back to our document. Now we're going to get covered few more terminology that we use during our testing, as well as that's it's used when the build the API, the REST API. Okay, so one of the terminology we use, or it shows, it's called request header or cookies. Request header or cookies, it means it represents the metadata associated with the API request. These are additional data or instruction sent through the API to process our request. This might define the type of response required or the authorization details. Okay, how these things works, we don't have to understand. This is, we're not developing, but we have to understand the different part or terminology that is used in the API. So one of this is request header. So under this part, it's associates some metadata. It's associate could be some of your authentication details, because if you send a request to an application from an application, that you need your authentication. Say example, if you want to pull a request, data for a specific order number from a Amazon, assume that, okay, you want to, so, or if you go over here, so from the Redison, the front-end applications, you have a booking reference. You already booked a hotel. Okay, so if you want to check that your status, your order details, so you are going to send a request through the Redison front-end website along with your order number. So it means this request will go to the the Redison API, and based on your order number, it will check the database and it will get back to the API the details, and it will show you over here. So before it shows there, Redison maybe wants to that are you the legitimate person, are you the right person to see these details. So they want to know, they want to have your account details, like your authentication, like maybe so you have to be registered user, so that time you have to pass your username and password. So to passing your, where you're going to pass your username, so along with your request you have to pass your authentication username and password, your authentication details. That Redison API will take that import, and that pass that input to the business logic to the database, so that at that time API should have a option where it will have the capacity to to validate your authentication. And here the request header, this part takes that take care that the authentication part. Okay, so if you see one of the example, I'm just giving you overall idea through the Postman, one of the my existing project. So here is one of the post request. You can see over here, this is a post request, and here it has a header. So inside the header you can see there is some metadata like the cookie, Postman token. So Postman token can be used to handle your authentication. So for your username authentication, right? So you can see there is lots of data that it's passed through your end request underneath the header. So header is nothing, it's holding some your metadata, some cookies, as well as some your authentication information that can be tied along with this header. Okay, so next is request body. So request body, what is request body, or what it does? The data is sent with the request. So request body hold the data it's sending with the request. So data is normally sent in the request when a post request is made to the RESTful API. In a post call, the client actually tells to the REST web service that it wants to add a resource to the server. Hence the request body would have the details of the resource which is required to be added to the server. So usually the request body is only used when you have a post request, because post request is nothing that you want to update some data, right? Or you want to create some data. Okay, you want to create some data, or you want to insert some data to your database. Like for the get will not have any body. So get, here is my get, so you will see the body is empty because get is nothing. Get method is used to retrieve some data. So all you want to retrieve extract some data from your database. But the post can have a body because post is help you to create new record to the database. So what type of data? It's the data is over here. So in underneath the body, in this section, you will pass your data. Okay, so here it's like for example, our employee, I want to create a new employee record. So that time this is your endpoint. Over here your method would be post, and then you will pass the employee information, whatever the parameter you need to pass, like name, salary, age, and so on. Okay, and this is a JSON format. For the REST API we use JSON format, and which is very easy to understand, very lightweighted. So you can see this is an example of the body. That's body, it's hold the data that you want to insert to your database. Okay, that's very simple. So next is response body. So along with your request body, when when the response come back, when a HTTP response come back to the to the front end, so this HTTP response that carry some of the data, like whatever the data you requested from the database. So this response, so response body holds some response. Example, if I show you again our employee, so for the get employees over here, this is the response body. You can see this part is the response. Okay, this part is the response. So this response is retrieving all the employees data because it was our request, get request, and our resources was, our endpoint was like employees. So we want to retrieve all the employees data. So our response body, this is the body for this part is response, and this is the body. So response body will hold all the response data that's extract from the database. Okay, that's very simple. Okay, this is the main body of the response. So in our RESTful API example, if we were to query the web services, by the request. So this is our say endpoint, the employee for employee specific employee or all the employees, whatever you can say. If we say employee number 1 or employee all the employees, the web server might return the JSON document with all the details of that specific employee or all the employees underneath the response body, as we have seen our one of the example through the Postman tool, right? Then next is response status code. So this, there's a number of code they use when the response comes to a endpoint, to a incline, okay, and that each and every code, it represents some of the meaning. So you can say these codes are general codes which are returned along with the response from the web server. So when the server returns some response along with the response data, so along with the response body, whatever the data comes along with that, there is some code comes with that, and each and every code have a different meaning. An example, the code 200, which is normally returned if there is no error when returning a response to the client. Example I can show you over here. Here is this is our response, right, for our get all employee request, and this is our response body. And beside that, you will see there is a status code, the 200. So this 200 is one of the response status code. So like this 200, there's a number of response code that comes with the response body, and each and every number status code have a different meanings. 200, it means the response it successfully came to the client or came to the API, so there is no error happen. So you have to understand, or we need to have a good knowledge about the different type of response status code and what does it mean. And I will show you a link in the below where you will have a all the status code that is used in API and the meaning. Here I'm just showing you. If you go to our website codeandboxautomationlab.com and just type over here status code, hit on the search, so you will see the REST API response code. So if you click on there, you will find all the response code that comes along with your response, API response. So 100, the series, there is a number of response that usually used underneath the 100. So it could be the 100, 101, 102, and the meaning is you will find 100 means it's continue. You will find 200, the series of 200s, like if you use 200 OK, it means there is no error and it's successfully return the response. There is a 202 acceptance, so you will find 204 no contain, so you will find this different type of response. So the example like 300 response, 400 response is 400 is also very frequently we see on our API response, because 400, if it shows 400 with your response, it's like it means like bad request. 41 is unauthorized. If there is an unauthorized request has been request, so a response will come along with the response. There will be 401, which is unauthorized. Okay, 403 is forbidden. 404 is not page found or not found, which is very common. We see the API response, right? So this is the response, different response code we need to know during our testing, because beside our response, when you're going to test for a request, we have to test the request, and beside our request we have to check our response too. And response is the one of the big part that we have to test when you do the API testing. And beside this response body information details, you have to confirm, we have to check the status code too. What is the status code? So if it's the status code 2 and we see the details, the response as we expected it, then you can say your test case is passed. So the status code plays a very important part in our API testing. Okay, so pretty much that's all the terminology that we want to cover. I want to cover before we start our API actual testing. And hopefully stay tuned. From the next tutorial we're going to start to download the Postman tool, and we'll see all different features, and then the actual testing will be learning to start from the next tutorial. So stay tuned. Please share and like this tutorial, and have a good one. See you in the next tutorial. Bye bye.